welcome to Warren and Will's Wild Wine Reviews. I am Warren.
And I'm Will.
Let's see, probably want to know a little bit about us before we start drinking. I am a featured user on Vivino. I've had 2,000 wines in the last 5 or 6 years. Love all kinds of different kinds of wines, travel a lot to check out wines in different places, and that's who Warren is.
My name is Will. I'm a certified sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers. I worked for a long time in the wine industry. I worked in retail wine stores. I spent 2.5 years at a winery. And for about a year, I was employed as a sommelier of a local wine bar here in Southwest Virginia, where we both live. I got into wine, I guess, my senior year of college. And one of the things I tell people is that there are basically 2 different reactions to wine. Is that, oh my gosh, there's too much, I could never learn it all. Or, oh gosh, there's too much, I'll never learn it all. It's a never-ending adventure. And part of the reason that Warren and I became friends was we bonded over a mutual love of wine and a mutual love of finding new and interesting wines.
And I just don't like to drink alone. I'm always looking for somebody to have fun with and share it with. And what you're going to see here is kind of just... It's very organic. Mm-hmm. It's the way that we tend to drink and talk. We drink and we know things.
Yep.
And we're going to share those things with you. Will knows more of the technical aspect. I've had a lot of wines and from places that, Will hasn't, or I bring them back and make sure I get to share them. But that's one of the reasons with people would always say when we'd be hanging out at parties we were at, it's like, I never thought it would be interesting to listen to 2 dudes talk about wine, but that was riveting. So I can't promise riveting.
Perhaps it's because no one's ever tried.
Well, this is true.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be your typical wine review where we are not going to focus just on this wine. Boy, are we going to focus on this wine.
Yes.
But we are also just going to let the conversation go, and anything that kind of pops into our head as we talk it over will come out.
Yep.
Now, hopefully you'll find that enjoyable. If you don't, we'll miss you.
Yeah.
If you did, because that's who we are. This is what we're trying to do here. Never seen a wine blog or a wine reviewer who just talked.
Right.
It's always, I got a subject. I mean, we have a starting off point.
Right.
We have Doubleback. That's where we're gonna start. So this has been canting for about an hour and 10 minutes.
Roughly.
So what we're dealing with here is Doubleback. It's a Cabernet Sauvignon 2016 from Walla Walla. According to Vivino, it gets 4.5 stars with about 2,200 ratings. Price right now is $141 a bottle. It was $80 when I bought that. It's going up pretty quickly. This is the 2016. I've also had the 2018, which I really like. The 2016, however, is less young. So we're going to start with that. Now, as I said, we had an hour, 10 minutes or so of decanting this one. This I've had it before.
Yeah.
This wine is worth decanting.
Yeah,
it is stunning.
definitely.
So I'll tell you the story of the vineyard and all that happy stuff in a bit.
Just wild jammy fruit right off the bat.
Really big nose.
I remember being surprised that this was from Washington. It definitely has aspects of what I consider to be Washington Cab. But I mean, I would not have guessed blind this was a Washington Cab.
Now, this is as big as anything you're going to get now.
Oh, absolutely.
This is
absolutely.
Stunning. I saw some guy review it and said, "Oh, it's so priced because it's owned by a celebrity winemaker."
No.
This is stunning. I haven't had my sip yet, but
yeah. Now, had he tried the wine yet?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
He was just complaining about the price.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is what you get when you pay $150 a bottle.
Now,
this is what you should get. This is not overpriced for what I'm drinking.
I will say where the Washington character really shines through is just on that first step. I got this bracing acidity. It's just like this grabs you by the side of the tongue, and Washington is a cooler climate than California. And whenever you have a cooler climate, by and large, you're going to get higher acidity. And you're going to get a different type of acidity than you would.
Now, acidity isn't what you think it is. It's not like, oh, wow, that tastes like vinegar
acid,
or acid. It actually smooths it out, makes it easier to drink.
Well, and also one of the things it does is it makes you salivate. There's a reason that wine and
totally
food go together so well. Is that wine will provoke your taste buds and provoke your salivary glands. And when your mouth starts watering, we're all dogs to some kind of Pavlovian bell. And when you ring that bell, your stomach starts thinking it's time to eat.
All right, so what we have here in a fairly attractive, it's heavy, yes, we think we have a good wine here way, is Doubleback. Now, the interesting thing about Doubleback is that the owner of the vineyard's name is Drew Bledsoe. Some of you will recognize his name.
I did not.
Many of you will not. He was a quarterback for the New England Patriots, then went on to the Buffalo Bills and finished out his career in Dallas. The name on the Doubleback is when he was done with football, he doubled back and he purchased property in Walla Walla, Washington to do the wines. And the really amusing thing for me is he then hired a very well-known winemaker named Josh McDaniels. Not to be confused with the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots and now the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. That's a different Josh McDaniels.
Now, was he with the New England Patriots at the same time that Drew Bledsoe was? Okay.
Yeah, so it's very amusing.
That is amusing, yeah.
And he knows both Josh McDaniels fairly well, I would guess. Now, Josh McDaniels is a very highly thought of winemaker who is one of the top winemakers under 40. Let's see, where'd my little notes go? They called him a game changer of Washington wine, a Washington prodigy. Tastemakers of America from Wine Enthusiasts called him a boss. So this is shockingly good.
Yes.
Shockingly good.
No, the nose is just immediately like perfumey.
Yep, lots of fruit, but also floral.
Yeah, no, the thing that really stands out for me on this is like a sort of rosy violet, like,
and with some spices underneath.
Definitely, absolutely.
Very gentle, but they're there.
And it's interesting because, when I think of Cabernet Sauvignon, the eucalyptus and mint are some herbal characteristics. Rose and violet don't really enter.
But they're both here.
They're definitely both here. No, and this is one of those things that's that like you might try 1,000 cabs and then have one that does something completely different.
And yet it still feels like a cab. I would guess cab if I drank this.
Yeah,
I would guess Napa cab.
Yes.
But I would guess cab.
Yeah, I would definitely guess like a cooler climate cab. I'm not sure I would have gone as far north as Washington because again, but then again, I had a Lake Cole number 41 Syrah, which was absolutely magnificent and very perfumey, kind of in this way. And so apparently there's something about whether it's the climatic conditions in Washington or something that can lead to this kind of perfumey character in red grapes.
One of the things we often talk about is like, I own 55 acres and I'm never going to grow wine. I love wine. I would probably really enjoy owning a vineyard.
Yes.
But I want to like my wines.
Yep.
And I live in Virginia and I don't like Virginia wines. I'm a big Cabernet fan. I also love Syrah. Those are two grapes that are not going to grow well on the side of my mountains and the hills that I own because I'm at 2,600 feet and it rains all the damn time.
The main thing to note here is whether you love Virginia wine or hate Virginia wine, there are good places to grow grapes in Virginia and there are bad places to grow grapes in Virginia.
I live in a bad one.
Well, and it's mostly bad.
Yeah, mostly
you have to
bad.
search hard to find a good spot, which is part of the reason Virginia wine has the iffy reputation that it sometimes does.
I'm gonna champion that iffy reputation.
Yeah,
I'm very sorry, Virginia. I didn't grow up here. I moved here.
Well, and also, maybe... I would just like to say, as someone who is from Virginia and who likes Virginia wine, that Virginia does have a problem with being willy-nilly about where grapes are planted and where it comes from. And part of that is that instead of thinking about like how is this going to impact how our wine appears, wineries and tourism have always gone hand in hand, and the idea is that if you can just bring people here, and the vast majority of them don't know enough about wine to know that it's bad. A lot of people just assume that if they don't like a wine, that it's just a personal preference as opposed to a quality designator about a wine. So if you bring a tourist into a winery and they try a bunch of wines, they don't really particularly like any of them, they might not necessarily think, oh, Virginia wine is bad. They'll just be like, the wines weren't great.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it doesn't matter what the varietal is. I've never tasted a Virginia wine that really knocked my socks off. I've had a couple that I didn't think were horrible.
Yeah.
And occasionally there's a good year, like 2005, which, was a good year everywhere. The vineyard up the hill, I live 7 miles away from a vineyard that makes wine I won't drink.
Yeah.
However, in 2005, they had a kick-ass Cab Franc.
Yes.
It happens now and then.
Yep.
They didn't do anything different that year. Just 2005 was a great year.
The weather
for
did
wine.
something different that year.
Yeah, so that year they got a great varietal. And in fact, I've had some others from 2005. They were
Yeah.
not all, none of them were wines that made me happy, but they were
Right.
all better than earlier versions.
Yep.
And then in 2006, they reverted back to mean.
Yep.
But, you know, it
Well,
is
and it's
what it
also
is.
worth noting that up until I don't know exactly when I grew up during pretty much a partial drought in Virginia, and so for the first time, basically ever, Virginia was kind of producing wines that were a little bit better than they had when,
Because
mostly as a result of the drought.
You want to stress the hell
You
out
do.
of your berries. I mean, I have one of the cool things about being on Vivino. I'm a featured user, as is Will. So follow us on Vivino. And if
Yes.
you don't have Vivino, get it. You will be able to avoid bad wines. You will be able to find good wines. It is wonderful. That scan, you go
Yep.
to the store, you take a picture of the label, and it gives you all the information you could ever want. You won't overpay for wines. It's just perfect. But
I one time was shopping, and this was back when I first started using Vivino, and I had bad service for whatever reason, and all of a sudden I felt like my flashlight had gone out in a basement. It was like, because I knew I knew that I was in a grocery store where none of the wines were particularly good, but I knew that if I had Vivino, I could find like that one diamond in the rough that was slightly better than the rest, and that's one I wanted to take home. And it's like, if I just shoot from the hip, I mean, they're all Cabernet Sauvignon. How do I choose one?
I was at the beach on vacation in Beaufort, North Carolina. I think it is North Carolina. And there was this really expensive wine shop that looked like it had a great selection. Lots of wines, really well put together, looked pretty, great labels. But I walked in and I didn't recognize a single wine.
Right.
Now that set a lot of alarm bells off. I should not, since I've had 2,000 wines at Vivino, I should not be able to walk into your wine shop and not recognize a single wine. I pop out my phone, I start taking pictures, and I discover he doesn't have one wine in this place that goes for more than $12.99 nationally. He's charging $50 and more. He doesn't have any expensive wines.
Wow.
Well, he has a ton of inexpensive wines. What he's not doing is sharing that price with the customers, because this isn't a town where he's expecting anybody to come in again. This is a vacation town.
He's got a captive audience.
He knows you don't know those wines.
Or
Well,
that he's the only person in town selling those wines.
No, I went right next door and
they had the same one.
several much better wines.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there was a wine bar that also sold, and they had.
Oh, there you go.
I walked in, I'm like, we got. We got the Prisoner. We've got, and this was a few years back when the Prisoner was still quite good. We've got Molly Duker's The Boxer. So there's a $30 bottle of wine I'll drink all day. So I was golden, but I might have made a mistake. And the guy was telling me about how exquisite some of these wines were, and they were real high end. Bull. The guy was just making it up because I wasn't coming back. I'm on vacation. He knows it. This app cuts through that.
And the flip side of that is if you're at a wine store and you're on a budget, or you're like me and you're just looking for a bargain, what you can do is find, depending on your own personal preferences, you're looking at a $10 bottle of wine, you see it's rated 4.2. Then you start looking through the reviews and seeing whether or not they're worth anything. Because I made this mistake on 19 Crimes. The thing is what I realized is it was getting 5-star reviews from people who buy 19 Crimes every day and love 19 Crimes. If I had actually read the reviews, I would have probably stayed away from it.
The other thing that I would suggest is that when you're looking at your stars, the minute the bottle hits $50, add a half star, because people are taking a half star off.
Yes, they're being much rougher on it.
More for the money.
Yeah.
So when you see a $50, $100 bottle of wine with the same number of stars as Apothic Red, let me assure you, it's not because anybody thought they were just the same.
Well, and also people who are drinking Apothic Red might necessarily like those $50, $100 bottles of wine.
Won't.
Yeah.
So one of the things why I suggest follow people, learn which ones have the same palate as you, enjoy wines you enjoy.
Follow people,
them, and look at what they have to say. Like
follow them, like their reviews, and comment on their reviews.
Them, So what I like to do is I have a group of people, and if they like it, then I know I like it. And so that helps me a lot. I'm followed by over 3,000 people, but I don't follow that many back because, if somebody's primarily a
scanner.
Well, people scan a lot, but if they drink primarily whites, I don't have any reason to follow them. I'm not. We're gonna do some whites, but if you're like all about whites, we're probably not gonna make you happy. We will throw some in. I mean, I've got some awesome 10, 15, 30-year-old Rieslings we're going to get to. I love Riesling. It's the one white that just cuts right through, and I love it as much as I love Cabernet. Syrah.
Yep.
I just love it, but only when it's from Germany and occasionally from France, and it's 10 years or older.
Right.
Because then it's really complicated, really complex. There's a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
And that, as a wine drinker, is what I'm looking for most. Is I want that subtle play across my tongue. I want to feel the tannins in the back, or I notice the tannins. I feel them on the sides on this one, and that kind of, and then the fruit, you can taste that on different places, and that's what I'm drinking.
And it changes over time, the evolution of the wine.
I don't want the wine to be the same an hour later, because there are some, because you can put so many additives into wines today.
You're legally allowed to do so.
A ton of mega purple in, which really darkens the color, and liquid smoke and a couple of other things. You can decant it for 3 hours, and it's going to taste the same until you can't drink it.
Right, because the primary flavor components
won't drink.
Yeah, well, the thing,
they don't break down.
Yeah, they don't break down, and they don't. I mean, the thing is they taste the way they taste regardless of their exposure.
And that's
to oxygen.
that's what that winemaker was after. He's not trying to sell me wine,
right?
Because if he was, he'd be making Doubleback.
Well, and if you think about it this way, it's just like there are some people out there who might like the fact that their wine isn't evolving in the glass.
No, they're not might. There are people.
Oh, yeah.
There are people who bitch when it changes. Well, I like the first glass.
But all of a sudden it's different. Yeah, it got oxygen.
But that's what we're looking for, right? Yep. Nasty oxygen.
Definitely lots of dark fruit. Pretty much, I would say all dark fruit on the palate. Just blackberry, blueberry. Jammy without being too jammy. Because this is Washington. This isn't going to get into that overblown... Yeah, but definitely a lot of sweet fruit character.
Fruit forward is just a little too strong to describe it. And yet, you know, if you like fruit forward wine, let me posit that you will like this.
It's less fruit forward than you would think from the aroma, but more fruit forward than you would think for Washington.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, people are forever trying to grow wine wherever they are.
Yes.
But this guy, Drew Bledsoe, because he made a lot of money playing football, managed to buy wine in the right area.
Yep.
Planted the correct one out and got very expensive, very good vines.
Yeah.
And then hired one of the best winemakers in the world. That's how you make a good wine.
Yep.
You don't just go out there, plant a bunch of grapes, and watch YouTube videos.
Right.
You're not going to win.
Well, and the other thing is that as much as I dislike that some vines are more expensive than others, they're supply and demand. Some clones or some strains of certain types of grapes. I mean, Cabernet Sauvignon is Cabernet Sauvignon the world around. It's genetically the same thing, but different clones exist of the same grape. Some of them are numbered. Some of them have names.
We'll be doing Wente, and they have their Wente clone
of their Chardonnay grape.
The Chardonnay that everybody wants.
Yeah, and has been used to plant many more modern. And the thing is, Wente. You and I talked about this one time. Is we heard about that they were bigger than they're one of the oldest.
They were the oldest.
The oldest, that's right.
The oldest continually. They didn't stop during Prohibition because they had a contract that allowed them to sell sacramental wines to Catholic churches. And so they were able to continue to function.
And neither you or I are
and most of the others had closed down. Well, neither you or I are Catholic.
Right. Well, I was raised by a Catholic.
Well, there you go. Good enough.
Oh, I'll tell you who else they sold sacramental wine to, and that was synagogues.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. The two groups of people in America during Prohibition that were legally allowed to consume wine.
Well, everybody who belonged to the Yale Club because they bought it, and they were grandfathered
actually,
in, and they could go to the club and drink anytime they wanted.
The funny thing about I should rephrase that, because the funny thing about Prohibition in America was that you could make the stuff, you just couldn't sell it. I think. I mean,
and if you were rich, you did not have to live with it.
Oh, no. Not at all. Well, it's just like anything else. It's like healthcare or drugs.
Right,
if you're rich, you're going to be able to find it, and it's going to be good.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons that Americans, to this day, love Italian food was that in the 1920s, the clause that they left in, because if they hadn't put this clause into Prohibition, there would have been a full-scale rebellion. They said you can make up to 150 gallons worth of beer or wine a year. Every individual, every adult can. You just can't sell it. You can give it away and you can drink it yourself, but you can't sell it.
And they would give it away with the meals.
With the meal.
In the Italian restaurant. You could have a glass of wine with your meal.
Well, actually, the original Italian restaurant wasn't even a restaurant. You just went to they would hang a sign out front of their brownstone, and you'd go into the first floor of their apartment building.
And they'd cook for you.
Yeah, they'd cook for you. And then they made enough money during Prohibition selling the food, and the wine was free, and they were very clear about this. Mm-hmm. The wine was free, and you paid for the food. They made enough money during Prohibition that a lot of them then did start restaurants, and so by the 1940s, the Italian restaurant was a cornerstone.
Mainstay,
and it's all it took was just that 10-year period during Prohibition for Americans to decide they really liked tomato sauce and pasta.
This alcohol content's a little lower than I would have guessed.
What was it?
14.4.
Yeah.
It tastes more like one that's usually around 15 or 16.
You know what it is?
It's not hot.
It's that
don't get me
incredible
wrong.
perfume at the beginning.
It is.
The perfume at the beginning might seem to suggest to you that this wine is more high alcohol than it is. It's not. That's just how incredibly floral it is.
Yeah, it's just really well made.
Yeah, there's a lot
Really
of
well
lot
made.
of vapor in this wine.
And anyone who's like, oh, well, it's just because it's Drew Bledsoe,
No.
these are not people who've had a lot of high-end wines, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, the only wine I can think of that absolutely, I mean, we'll actually review this sometime probably in the next 6 months, is the Wraith.
Mm-hmm.
This compares to that. I don't know if it beats it or even ties it, but it's in the same, conversation.
I mean, for me, it's one of those subjective versus objective. For me,
Yeah.
subjectively, I like this better than the Wraith. Objectively, I'm not sure which is the better wine. But I just know that in general, pound for pound, I'm probably going to like Pacific Northwest wines better than California wines.
I didn't used to drink Washington wines.
Yeah, I remember.
But, I realized that I just like Washington wines.
Well, the thing about Washington is it has the same, I don't want to say the same, but it has a similar kind of, Washington is to America what Bordeaux is to France. I don't necessarily mean in terms of the overall quality level or the prestige, but the growing conditions, is it has some of the coolest climates that you can still grow heavy
and get good
heavy red grapes
results.
in. Yeah. I mean, there are cool climates that you can grow, like Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio and make sparkling wine and stuff. But to have a cool climate where you can, especially that far north, where you can grow things like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Syrah, and not only do them decently, but do them really well, it's a special region of America.
Now, these guys make a lot of other wines underneath their Bledsoe McDaniels line, which are apparently more approachable.
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't had them. I probably will just keep drinking Doubleback.
Might be fun to grab some of them at some
point.
point.
It might be. It might
Do they distribute them here in Virginia?
They don't distribute this in Virginia as far as I know. I ordered this from, I think, wine.com.
Okay.
So you should be able to find a link for wine.com. If you go there and buy the wines, we get a percentage, and that'll make it easier for us to keep doing great reviews for you. And these long-winded, winded's the wrong word. Well, extended conversations where Will will throw out a bunch of really cool facts and I'll make shit up.
Yeah. And if
I'm honest as all get out.
if I ever say anything that I find out later is incorrect, I will try to come back and correct it. I'm trying to.
And if I ever make up anything that's untrue, I will let you know when I find that out. So just think of us as a couple of drinking buddies.
Yep.
We know a lot about wines, or Will knows a lot about wines. I know more about wine than most people who haven't got certified or taken courses on it.
The thing is once you know a certain amount, you start imposter syndrome kicks in real hard, especially with wine.
I mean, especially when I do a lot of blind tastings. I find blind tastings really valuable.
Yeah.
Because that has taught me over time. You sit down, you do 10 wines, and you discover that the $1,000 wine came in last.
Right.
And the top wine was like $70.
Right.
And so after a while, when you do this and you do your notes before they unveil what it is, you really start to learn to not pay any attention to anything other than how the wine tastes in the glass.
Right.
And that's all that matters, which also brings me to a big point. You want to know what a good wine is? Do you like it?
Yes.
If you like it, it's a good wine. Now, it may not be a good wine for someone else. They may not like it, but don't let anyone tell you not to like what you like.
And we're not here to gatekeep anything. We're not here to tell you that because we're drinking a $150 bottle of wine that only expensive wines or only cabs or the thing is that we're very particular and we're opinionated, but that doesn't mean that our opinion extends beyond the two of us.
We will occasionally surprise you.
Yeah.
And probably a few more early on to give you an idea. Also, because one of the things is that I've discovered a lot of really good, inexpensive wines.
Yes.
That we're going to review once, and then until I can get my hands, until there's another year that's as good, or I can get my hands on some more of it, we won't. But the bottom line is that we've had $25, $30 bottles of wine that were just as good as any $100, $200 bottles of wine. I've got one from 2012 that we're going to do fairly soon, and you're going to be, if you can get your hands on it, really impressed. So our price point, because I like these wines, and it's easy to find good ones at $100, $50. You got to work hard to find the others, and it's there. It's worth the work.
Right.
If especially if it's tough for you to buy $100 bottle of wine every week.
Right.
When I first started drinking wines, I couldn't afford a $9 bottle of wine every week.
Right.
I could do it once a month. Now I can afford it almost every day because life has changed. But so we may be doing more expensive wines than non-expensive wines. But it's not because we're snobs.
No.
We are snobs.
We are snobs.
But we're still going to do less expensive ones.
You can be snobby on a budget, luckily.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing. Don't these guys dislike anything? They love everything. Well, mostly we know what we've had these
Yes.
wines. When I've had 2,000 wines, it can be hard to go into a shop, even a big shop, and find a wine that that's a varietal that I like that I haven't had.
Right.
But
it would be fun to talk to somebody, whether it's Randall at Vintage Cellar or a distributor or something, and give them an idea of what we've done so far when we've been doing this for a while, and say, hey, throw us a ringer, one that we haven't had, something that we haven't had.
And
before.
one of the things we're going to ask you guys to do is, let us know what you'd like to see us review. Is there a wine you've been trying to decide, am I going to blow that $100 on this wine?
Right.
We'll tell you if it's worth it. Most people don't want to just drop $100 on a bottle of wine. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
So, if you, email us, say, there's one, and we may, if I can get my hands on it, if it looks like something I'd enjoy, which brings me back around to that point I was trying to make. It's not that we're trying to only review wines we like, or not. If we don't like a review, we won't run it, or if we're just trying to make advertising dollars.
Right.
We're not doing that. If we don't like the wine and we open it and we start drinking it here, we aren't going to cancel that.
Right.
That review. We're going to do that.
If this bottle had been corked, we would have told you.
But I wouldn't necessarily blame that on the
that has
on the
nothing to do with
producer.
them. Yeah.
And in this case, we would have immediately opened the 2018 that I have in my cellar, and we would have compared how that is. So we'll be getting to the 2018 in a bit. I actually really, really, really like the 2018.
That being said, I think
do the one with a little more
this
age first.
This,
this
and
is
this
a very
is just
good
as
one. I don't know if I'd go that far.
Really?
Really, I really like the 2018.
Okay,
I really liked it.
As I've said before, my memory is not eidetic.
No, that's it. This is stand.
I remember the 2018 being very perfumey.
It was a little bigger in the mouth.
Okay,
too,
I could see that.
Which is the thing that I'm looking for. I love a big mouthfeel.
Yeah. But overall, what really hits me about this wine is just it's the flavor mouthfeel combination. There is a silkiness to the wine that matches the richness of the fruit.
Yes.
And
I like silky mouthfeel. Silky, satiny, and this just nails it.
It really does nail it, yeah.
If this were a baseball player, it would have hit 3 home runs today. Babe Ruth.
Yep.
Or if it were a quarterback, it might have gone in when the starting quarterback went down in the AFC Championship and the team was down by 10 points and Drew Bledsoe took the Patriots to the Super Bowl that he didn't get to play in and should have because he deserved it. And they never would have gotten there because Brady was completely baffled by that defense and Bledsoe went in and lit it up. So
now, if that had happened, would he have ever made this wine?
Oh, if he'd gotten to play in that Super Bowl? I don't know. I mean, he would have won that Super Bowl, too. He literally was better at reading defenses at that point than Brady was, and he had a bigger arm. So I can't think of any reason that he would have lost that game. Right. So, it is what it is.
I assume the name Doubleback was a play on halfback or quarterback.
No, he's a quarterback. So, twice what he's doing as a quarterback. I don't know. But
he doubled back on something.
he hit this out of the park just like he did when he won that game. That was one of the most impressive things. Just cold off the bench, won the damn game.
I never knew there would be such a football wine overlap.
I know. Who knew? I am not a huge sports geek, but I do love NFL football. So, if Tony Romo puts out a wine, I'll see if it's any good. I really am not a fan of Tom Brady, so if he puts out a wine, I'm probably not going to drink it.
Yeah.
Oh, who am I lying? I'll drink it.
Try to tasting
who am
at
I
least.
Lying to? Yeah, I would tell you. I would at least try it. But it would be flat,
Oh!
I'm sorry. It's terrible.
No oxygen in it whatsoever?
Right, they lower the... Just if you need to know, I don't want to go into it. Just Tom Brady flat balls. That's all you need. Well, maybe flat.
Deflated.
Deflated.
Yeah.
You're going to have fun tonight.
Yeah. Be careful when you Google that.
Yes, yes, and make sure that you put yourself into
Incognito
mode. You don't want to explain that to your significant other.
Why did that pop up on the autofill?
Oh boy.
In case you're wondering,
I had not planned to go there.
This accurately captures
this is
how we do this when we're not being videotaped.
Yep, this is exact. Oh, and you ought to see us when we're on our second or third bottle.
Yes.
That you won't actually get to see.
No.
Because we're just going to do one per because it gets a little out of hand.
That being said, if you're looking for a mountain vacation and you come to Floyd,
look us up.
Drop
us a line. Let us know your comment.
It is very easy to find us because there's only one town of any size. It's only 400 people in a county of 14,000.
Yep.
And there's basically very few places to go.
Yeah,
so if you are a tourist in Floyd, if you go to the various businesses that are serving food and alcohol in the evening,
might run into us.
It is very likely.
But if you're going to be here, drop me an email. I'm an
Absolutely.
extrovert. I'm an extreme extrovert. I want to meet everybody.
And we would love to know that people are watching this, and
Yep.
and you know, if you do want to take a mountain vacation, there are fewer places you can go that are more beautiful than Floyd.
Floyd, Virginia is amazing.
Great hiking spots, great camping spots. I went out to visit some friends who are staying here in town for, I guess, at least the summer. They're from New Jersey, and their son just graduated from Roanoke College, and they came out basically in February to stay through May, and they're planning on going to Florida. And then I found out how freaking expensive. Well, that's what they figured out they shouldn't, and so they're basically staying in Floyd through the end of the summer.
I don't blame them.
Yeah,
No.
but they were just marvelous. They're staying at what used to be Chantilly. It's now Floyd Family Campground.
I'm completely aware of that.
And but they've just been marveling. It's just like, oh my God, we didn't know. I was like, yeah, you got here in February. Kind of a different landscape, icy and gray, and not all that much to do.
The one thing I will warn you, none of the restaurants have a knock your socks off wine list.
Unfortunately,
they really can't, because there's like 3 people in Floyd that will spend the money on great wines, especially at restaurant prices.
It can be hard anywhere in Southwest Virginia because it's not just the money;
it's the population.
It's the interest. Yeah, the people in Southwest Virginia who like good wine are often a little more, I don't want to say conservative, less adventurous in how much they're going to wander outside of something. For me,
conservative's not that bad a word for
yeah, but it brings up unfortunate implications.
Yeah. Well,
the thing about, and I know this from personal experience because I ran the wine list at a wine bar in Blacksburg.
Blacksburg has 2 great wine stores and several restaurants with top-notch wine lists.
Yeah.
So and that's only 30 miles from here, 30 minutes, So.
I am really pleased to see, because when I was going to grad school there, that was not happening there.
Let me give a shout out to my 2 favorite stores in Blacksburg. That would be the Vintage Cellar and the Wine Lab. That is where I order a lot of wines, but I get the vast majority of them at one of those 2 stores.
It should be noted that while Vintage Cellar is a brick and mortar store, Wine Lab is actually it's a wine bar restaurant, but they have a retail operation.
They've actually put in a little
like a counter space for
more than that. They got chairs, a little cafe.
Oh, interesting.
Now, they haven't really gotten that off the ground yet, but they're going to at Vintage Cellars.
I remember when I worked
those guys
there,
are going to be banging heads.
Yeah, I remember when I worked there. Boyer
was so they really want to kill each other, but I love them.
Well, in a small town, especially with something like wine.
Although, fortunately, it's a college town. So your small town consists of lots of professors and students coming in and out, and all of their parents. So, unlike Floyd, where there's 14,000 people in June, and in August, and in December, it just doesn't change, and there's just not enough people. And the other thing that often makes me sad is the average income of a family of 4 in Floyd is like $24,000. You're not selling that family a $20 bottle of wine, never mind a $200 bottle of wine.
No, it's not happening.
It would be nice if wines were, the really good ones were more accessible. Yes. Unfortunately, it's just not.
No. Wine has always been least accessible of the 3, beer, wine, and liquor. Because with liquor, if you're spending $40 on a bottle, at least that bottle is going to give you on average 15 or 16 individual glasses of that. And a beer, you can just buy one, even if it's really expensive. You can just buy one. You don't have to. But with wine,
you can buy one, but it's still
you're only going to
more
get
expensive and it's
4 or 5, 6 glasses out of it. And
Four.
well, yeah, depending on who you're drinking with.
Right. You're drinking with me, it's 4, maybe 3.
No, and that's one of the reasons that wine.
These are 500 milligram glasses.
Oh yeah.
So this is one bottle between the two of us.
Did I tell you that I sent Warren a picture recently? I went to the local thrift store, and they had just one, but it was this very wide-hipped red wine glass from, I think, like Crate and Barrel or something. And I picked it up for, I think, $0.25. But my friend Mike and I were talking about it. I said, I bet you this is one of those gag gift glasses.
I'm only having one glass of wine today.
Yeah, and it holds a bottle.
Yep.
It holds an entire bottle.
All right. Normally, we're going to usually kind of break off at the end of a full glass.
You want to do a little more?
This one's too good to bogart all by myself afterwards, and it's just such a good wine, and it's our first one, so we want to just keep talking.
The color on this is also amazing.
It is very, very deep purple.
It is
it's
basically
red
opaque.
tinge, yeah.
I can't see my fingers through it.
Drew, you nailed it, bro.
You really did. And I have to admit, I'm really glad that...
Josh, you did too.
I'm really glad that you introduced me to this, because I'm not going to say that when I see, like somebody who owned a sports team or did something like that, and they open a winery, my first instinct isn't like, oh, it's terrible. My first instinct is like, are they writing on their name and their cachet?
What I will say is...
It's nice to know he's also writing on the quality of the wine.
Yes. I mean, I always liked Drew Bledsoe.
Yeah.
The persona that he projected. The only quarterback that I ever liked more was Roger Staubach, because I was a little kid.
Yeah.
He was Captain Comeback.
Right.
And then, I'm a little bit older than Drew, and so when he was drafted by the Patriots, who, until they started cheating, were my second favorite team behind the Cowboys.
Well, you grew up there.
I was a little kid, loving it, and I grew up there. And so he just seemed like a great guy. I was happy when he ended up on the Cowboys. But at any rate, the bottom line is he seems like a really nice guy, and I'm glad that his wine certainly seems
Well, and I mean,
really
the thing is the way I look at it, this is from my perspective as a wine lover, and I would imagine Drew is too, if he
is.
If he got a world-class winemaker to make his wine.
He's also a native of Walla Walla, Washington, so that's
really?
kind of,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
But if I had retired from a job like that and are making wine like this, I'd be like, this is a pretty okay place to end up.
Yeah.
Owner of this winery. I don't know what else he's doing for personal projects.
If I had that kind of money, I'm not sure what I would do. I mean, I say that, but I own a publishing company.
Invest a bunch of it.
I publish books, and I've done very well at it. And I'm not sure I'm ever going to quit.
Yeah.
Because I won't need the money going into my old age. But what the hell am I going to do with myself? Sit on a porch and go, I used to be somebody?
Right.
No, it's just, so I understand, when you're done with one career, you move into another. I was in hair bands all through the 80s, and then I moved
And then you went into sci-fi publishing.
Well, yeah, science fiction, fantasy, and horror is what I've done primarily. Also, rock and roll publishing. I was partners with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley and did the official Kiss magazine. And so I'm not far away from being at a point where I could just stop.
Right.
I don't know why I would. So, what would I do if I had the kind of money he makes, which is a lot more than I made.
Right.
But I still made a lot more than most folks.
Right.
But, yeah, I suppose I would want to do something. You can't keep playing quarterback.
Right.
Unless you were, never mind that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just can't.
Well, and the thing is that, you can generate a passive income through investments and still do it. I mean, the nice thing about having a passive income from investments is you're no longer as concerned about whether or not a business venture works out
and
or turns a profit.
Is like every single book is a passive income stream forever now with today's technology.
A permanent residual.
Where you can do the ebook and you can do print on demand. Every book I publish now can stay in print forever, and I don't have to take anything other than the initial risk when I publish a big book of printing the originals, and then they just go into the system and people can order them from Amazon, and they don't exist until they order them, and then they got them, and then they print it and send it to you. So literally, I can quit work tomorrow and probably my income won't change much for a couple of years, but I keep doing it because
you like it.
Yeah. So Drew's doing something he likes.
Well, the thing is they're generating passive income for you to do the sci-fi stuff that you really, really enjoy.
Right, because that doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of money.
Right, but the thing is if I had a passive income, all of a sudden I would care a lot less about whether or not it made me any money. You know, because the thing is that, you know, if you don't have a large savings account, or if you're just,
You gotta hustle.
yeah, you got to hustle, and all of a sudden you're poised on a knife's edge, because the success of your business means whether or not, you know, you get
You've
to
got to
eat
spend that time to
exactly.
do it. And
Yeah, no, I mean that's it's I
see, we talk about stuff that we're gonna range.
we're gonna
Keep
range
going, bro.
far.
Yes, we are.
But one of the things we were talking about earlier was Wine Lab and Vintage Cellar in Blacksburg. When I worked for a year as the sommelier at Wine Lab, I got to really see up close. It's really different working in a retail environment versus working in a service, like a restaurant service environment with wine, because in a retail environment, you can sometimes talk people into buying things that you wouldn't be able to talk them into a service environment, and vice versa. In a retail environment, they might be buying a gift.
Yeah.
And if they're like, she likes this and this and this,
You tell them something they'd never drink on their own.
right, and like, how adventurous is she? Well, she's pretty adventurous. She likes, mountain climbing and stuff. Okay,
She's really adventurous. Here's Mad Dog 2020.
exactly. Take your life into your own hands. But in a service environment, the advantage that you have going for you is that you can, if you have it open, pour them a sample and let them try it in a way that you can't necessarily do in a retail environment. But you run into the same wall with wines that are by the bottle only, past a certain price point, with people who are like, we would have guys come in, and I could know within about 30 seconds of talking to them that they were going to get a bottle of Cabernet. Now, it was going to be higher end,
Yeah.
but it wasn't like that they were bad people or mean or rude or anything like that. But from just the way they were talking and how they were approaching the wine list, it was clear I wasn't going to be able to talk them into a South African Pinotage.
Right.
Or even if we had gotten some interesting a red that was very similar to a Cabernet in terms of body and style, if it wasn't a Cabernet, they weren't going to drink it.
Yeah, and you also, when you're in that, you have to like worry. If I make them spend, if I talk them into spending all their money on wine, will they stick me on the tip they don't have any money for anymore?
Right.
You know, and that's kind of a thing.
Well,
versus like every time, I remember before the Vivino app, I would ask, what do you think? What is the better? And they would always just point at the most expensive ones.
Right.
And I was just like, oh, I have great taste.
Right.
Or they just want to see if I'll buy the most expensive wine.
And I always prided myself on not pointing people towards the most expensive.
Yeah.
But I worked for a place. I wanted it to make money. No, it's like
selfish,
right? Well, we're all self-interested somehow. But I also want to get the way I looked at it is that making the wine bar money one day, but making the customer unhappy means that we won't have a repeat customer.
Again, yeah.
Making the customer ecstatic
and
means
you're
that
not
they
in
will.
Beaufort on the beach, so
Right.
you need them to come back.
Absolutely. And the nice thing about Blacksburg is that if they liked it, they'll bring their friends with them.
So if you get to, especially with the wine app, with Vivino, which, again, follow us, get it.
Mm-hmm.
It can be interesting, some of the experiences you can have. I was in a wine bar, walked into a wine bar in Vegas in a really expensive casino, and I went down there and I was freaking ignored. I'm probably dressed with a shiny shirt like this, and I got the hair, and they just write me off. And I sit down and they give me a wine list, and they have them set up in these. You can get different flights. You can have 5 of this one, 5 of this one, and there's about 20 of them that they've got selected and ready to go.
That's awesome.
Or you can pick 5 out of them. So I pull up my app and I'm going through, and I find the best one in each. They weren't necessarily the one that was the most expensive bottle or the most expensive by the glass, as it turned out. It was not set up that way. So I pulled what I thought were the 5 best after looking at. I spent like a half hour before I even made my order.
Yeah.
Pulling every single one. I put the order in. I mean, I am just freaking visible in this place. And then I hear a guy in the back who turns out to be the sommelier. He's like, who gave you this order? I said, the guy over there with the long hair. Sommelier sat down and he didn't leave my table all night. We spent the whole night trying to stump each other on wines we hadn't had. That was a really cool, neat thing. The long-haired hippie freak, and I'm not a hippie freak, by the way. I was a metal boy.
You're the opposite of a hippie freak.
The different, but that's what people see when I walk in. I would never have had that experience.
And I told him when he told me that story that that is, having worked as a sommelier, that is the kind of thing that he made that guy's night. because
and he agreed with all my reviews, or he would have stopped talking to me.
Oh yeah.
Just because I drank all those wines doesn't mean a damn
I also
thing.
wouldn't have left the table just because I didn't agree with you.
Well, no, but he wouldn't have spent the whole night
No,
there. He
probably
would have spent a polite amount of time, and off he would have gone.
One of the things that was so much fun working as a sommelier is that you're basically like a professional schmoozer, and you can choose who you want to schmooze, and there are different people that you can schmooze. And so, I'd go up to a table and ask them how are they doing and chat for a bit. And if they seemed like they were just content and just enjoying their wine, I would chat with them for 5 to 10 minutes and wander away. If somebody really wanted to delve into the world of wine, I could do that too.
Of course you could.
Yeah. But if I was there and I wasn't serving, I was free to delve into as much as I wanted because I wasn't on the clock. I wasn't. I didn't have any other tables that needed my attention, and that was one of the things I loved most about my job was that I could have a great time on my own, and I could make somebody else's night.
Right, yeah, it's absolutely true.
Make them want to come back.
Hanging out with the sommelier was the high point of that whole trip to Vegas.
Absolutely, because you got a professional wine geek at your table.
Now, another time I was in, it was very similar. I was in Myrtle Beach in North Carolina on vacation, and I just went into a place, and they had a tasting. I was like, yeah, I'll do your tasting. He brings that, they had a set tasting, and I popped up my Vivino. And this was back when I was really heavy because I'll get to that in a minute. So I start looking up the wines. He's like, oh, you're on Vivino. I said, yeah. And he said, what's your ranking? And I said, 23 in America. And he's like, you're in the top 2,300? I was like, no, dude, I'm number 23. He's like, you're not drinking any of this shit. And he took all the wines away, and he brought me a glass, 2 ounces of the 6 best wines he had. Mm-hmm. That would never have happened to me without Vivino, So at that point in my life, I was the highest rated non-industry person.
Correct.
Vivino. I also weighed 250 pounds, and because I was drinking a lot of wine, and there's, I don't know, I hate to break this to you, there's calories in this stuff. It's worse than soda.
Yep.
As far as the calories.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but at that point, part of the reason you were so highly rated on Vivino was you went to a lot of tastings.
I went to a lot of tastings, yeah.
And you rated every wine that you tasted.
Yep, every wine, every single wine.
Even if you hated it or it was.
Well, the thing is, I'm not gonna. You don't remember 2000. You cannot remember 2000 wines. One of the things that I like about Vivino is I'll look at a label and I'm like, I kind of remember not liking that. And I'll take a picture. 4.5 out of 5 stars. No, Warren, you like that. And there'll be another one. Oh, I have fond memories of this. You hate this one. So, I'm getting older. I'm forgetting things. My phone, Vivino, they don't forget a damn thing.
People love to ask me, because it's something you ask a wine expert. What's your favorite wine? And I'm like, well, how do you rate that? And so one of my fallbacks is, well, ever? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like,
ever? Ooh.
And I said, well, here's the thing. I said, if we're not normalizing the curve, if we are just ranking it on pure enjoyment alone.
Right.
Back in early 2008, I had been working in the wine industry for less than a year. And I was still, it was kind of like...
I didn't even drink wine.
It was like being a kid learning how to read and being thrown into a library. It's just like wander around and maybe you can't read every book. Maybe you're 6 years old and you're trying to pick through Crime and Punishment. You're like, it's not really for me.
Right.
But I had this wine called, it was the Vineyard is Chenayan. And I believe, if I recall correctly, I could have this backward. I think they're based out of Washington, but their fruit is coming from Oregon. Okay. Like I said, I could have that backward. Because there's a part of the Washington-Oregon border, which is basically...
I'll just stop you for just a second. We don't research this shit stuff because we don't know where we're going.
Right.
And that's a big part of this. Sorry about that.
No problem. It's a good thing to note.
I want to know that's why he can't spit that out because we didn't know
there are parts of Oregon and Washington where the AVA can be in either state. Yeah. I think one of them might be the Columbia... There's a Columbia Valley AVA that's in Washington and a Columbia Valley AVA that's in Oregon. Anyway, so Chenayan made this Merlot, and I swear to God, one of the flavor descriptors I wrote down for the aroma was orange peel. And it was just, it was, at that very, very early stage in my wine experience, the most enjoyable wine I'd ever drank. And I'm like, now, I'm not saying that Chenayan Merlot would still be my favorite wine ever. I'd probably still like it if I went back and tried it. But also, it was just that one vintage, that one time, that little particular moment. And wine is about... moments. It's not about wines. It's not about vintages. It's not about grapes. It's about moments.
They've actually done studies that show if you drink wine with people you care about, that you're enjoying their time,
Mhm.
the wine tastes better.
Everything tastes better if you're having a good time.
Wine more than anything
Probably
else.
more so.
Wine more so than anything.
And I would say one of the things that enhances my enjoyment of wine is drinking wine around other people that know wine.
Right. That's one of the reasons
Getting
that
to
is
do
one
this
of the,
kind of thing.
That's how we became really close friends.
Yep.
Is wine.
We got introduced by mutual friends who knew that we both liked wine and introduced us for the specific purpose of introducing us because we
like wine.
Yep.
And then slowly over the course of about a year,
Yes.
by the end of a year, I'd say we were best friends.
Pretty much, yeah.
But we had virtually
less than a year.
We had very little in common other than wine.
Right.
But
But then we discovered a whole host of other stuff.
Right, and of course, then since then we've had almost a decade of just hanging out and doing stuff together and having experiences.
I remember
and
it would. So we well, I guess it was a little bit over a year because we met in March of 2013.
Oh,
and it was.
See, he's way better at that
it
stuff
was
than I am.
in
9 years ago.
I think it was in May.
I'm good at math.
I want to say it was like May
Simple
of 2014 that we had. Remember that we had that get together at Riverstone.
Yes, I do remember that.
I think that
was the first wine potluck I went
Yep.
to, and
I think
then they started happening. If you can see that gazebo behind us, you're going to see some wine. We're going to do a lot of tastings there. Certain times of the day we can't do it.
That is our normal hangout
That is
spot.
where we would have done it, but the sun was shining in when we started, and it was horrible. So
we could have waited, but we didn't want to.
Right.
But that is
because this wine was calling our names,
Yep.
man.
But we often make far too much noise for Warren's wife to enjoy us drinking on the porch. So the gazebo is our normal hangout spot. Yeah.
Now I should build a gazebo further away so we can be as loud as we want to be. But
honestly, one of the
pond is just
one of the things I've loved about that gazebo is that I can drink wine and swim at the same time.
Yeah. Jump out, jump in.
It's
8 feet deep.
It's a
third of an acre. It's beautiful,
and it's spring fed, not creek fed.
So,
it never truly gets warm, but it never gets. Never gets.
It is
cold.
probably the coldest pond in Floyd in the summer.
Yes,
and it's one of the only ones that doesn't freeze over in the winter.
Correct. Now, it's great in the heat of summer because if you get out to the middle of the pond where you can feel the convection current of the water coming up out of the ground.
Just go down if you want to get cold.
Yep, all you have to do is just submerge yourself and you're immediately just in an icy grip, and it's wonderful.
So when I was in a rock and roll band in the 80s in a hair bands, I know it's hard to believe that someone who looks like me today could have been in a hair band in the 80s.
He's very inconspicuous.
Very inconspicuous. I didn't drink wine at all. In fact, I drank Keystone.
I was going to say
it was embarrassing. I drank
light beer was your go-to.
Yeah, and you know.
Well, I mean, I will say this about light beer: if you wanna drink all night and not get super trashed, light beer is a great way to go.
Yeah, I don't want to do those two things combined. By the way. So, if you have an opportunity to get Doubleback, as I said, we're going to have a link that you can go buy it, probably wine.com. There's a couple of others, but I'm pretty sure they've got it. If they don't, we'll find somebody for you. We are shooting this. In the future, we'll be way more prepared, but right now, we're this is going to be, as you know, this is our first.
Yeah.
So we're putting together a website and looking at how we're going to try to monetize this and what we're going to do for social media. So right now, we're a little loose, but we'll be real tight real soon once we've got all that down.
The other thing I want to suggest is that, like I said, a lot of people are drinking wine on a budget, and $150 might be outside your wheelhouse. If you're thinking about, you really want to buy a high-end bottle of wine, and or you would like to split the cost with someone, if you're going in on a bottle of wine with a friend, this would be a great bottle of wine to go in on.
Yep. Because
it's one of those things where normally would either of you split a $150 bottle of wine? Probably not. But I guarantee you will enjoy it. If you like cabs, obviously. If you're a Chardonnay drinker or a Riesling drinker and hate cabs, don't do it. But if you are a cab drinker, you like Washington Reds, this is one of those wines that I think would be a very special thing. And that it would be
a marvelous special occasion.
Yeah, and it would be one of the, like I said, wine is about moments, because I still remember that Chardonnay and Merlot. I don't have to look through my notes to find it. I still remember, 14 years later, more than 14 years later, that wine that without having to search through anything. I think this will be one of those moments, or could be one of those moments.
Speaking of moments, I still remember when I essentially became a red drinker. Now I was drinking beer, and this is kind of a long story, but I tore my rotator cuff off. I mean, completely off. It was just hanging in there, and I had to put it back on. And that's when I discovered that I have a pretty serious intolerance for any kind of opioid. So they make me itch a lot and throw up a lot, like
so
enough.
You,
so I
you
couldn't
have you
keep
have
the
no
medicine
risk
down.
of becoming a heroin
No,
addict.
that will never happen. Nothing if it's an opioid.
Yeah.
I'm never going to get addicted to it. So I immediately started drinking the beer in my fridge.
Yep.
And it wasn't helping
Right.
much. Enough that I didn't kill myself, but I mean,
Right.
it was really freaking painful when they put that back on. And the guy who did it was great. I mean, he does NFL quarterback shoulders, and I have 110% of my functional usage from before. I won't go into why I know that, but I do know that for certain. And so then I drank all the bourbon in the house, and that got me through my second
Right.
night. But it wasn't good. I got on the internet, and it suggested wine.
Mm-hmm.
So then I lived right around the corner. I was in Blacksburg from the Vintage Cellar. And Randall, the one of the main guys there, and I are tight because we have the same favorite author, and I published that author. And so he started steering me at the kind of whites that I would drink. This is a Swedish Chardonnay, you'll like it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, you got to try this Riesling. That's a 10-year-old Riesling. It's a little expensive, but I bought
Yeah.
it. And I was just like, ooh, that's really good. So then he
That's how you
starts
become a
feeding
Riesling
me
drinker.
nothing but expensive Rieslings, and I'm just hooked on them. And then one day he's like, you've got to try this. And it was Rubis, R-U-B-I-S.
Yeah.
They are a vineyard. And the reason that they're not a vineyard,
A winery,
they're
yeah.
a winery. They're not even really a winery. They resell wine.
Yeah, they're a brand.
But the reason they exist is, and they never would say, and we never found out, one of the really high-end Napa Cab had a double yield on their grapes that year. They didn't know why, but they weren't willing to bottle it all because it would bring down the cost of their wine.
Right.
Why it didn't occur to them to create a separate label and sell it at half the price with a different name on it, I
Might
don't
have taken
know.
too long.
Right, it was too much. But this guy bought all the extra grapes so that and then he launched that in Rubis, and so he was telling me it was a $25 bottle of Cab. He said, try this, and I had it. It was freaking stunning. I mean, there was all this stuff going on. It was great.
And it never happened again.
It never happened again. They've had some okay wines, but they've
Right.
never had a great wine.
Well,
but
and
that was a great wine.
They found themselves a brand model that would have worked really well if they had kept. Now, granted, they might not have been able to replicate it in terms of volume.
Yeah, you couldn't get that good a wine every year. It's not
No, you
gonna
couldn't.
happen.
But it would be really fun to have a brand built around. We go around buying grapes from high-end wineries who will remain a mystery to you.
Right.
You can guess at it if you want or whatever. That would have. And then, granted, it's probably the case that most high-end wineries aren't going to be selling that amount of fruit
Most
every
of them
year.
are struggling to have enough grapes every
Exactly.
year.
So
And
it's one of those sort of like one-time things.
But what he said to me is, the reason you like these wines is they're really complex.
Mhm.
This is really complex.
Yep.
And that was like, it hit me. It really was. And then I realized there was only one kind of white that was rocking my world anymore.
Which was
And
Riesling.
And it had to be 10 or 15 or 20 years old.
Yeah.
And from Germany and a little small area in France that I was willing to drink. Otherwise, it just tasted like sweet wine.
One of the problems with white wine, not problems with it. The problem with being aficionado of white wine is that it doesn't have the shelf life of red wine, and part of that reason is that red wine, just by its very nature,
Knowledge. Listen.
has more tannins.
Yep.
Which are going to keep tannins are a structural element that are actually used to bind proteins in plant systems, which is why cheese and red wine will always go so well together.
And most of the time, when you find stuff that you think is vegetal matter in your wine, what it is the tannins binding with the color, the pigments in the wine.
The other is solid tartaric acid that has come out of solution and formed cream of tartar.
So sorry to disrupt.
Oh no,
you
not at
again.
all. The other thing is that red wines are often kept in oak.
Yeah.
Chardonnay can be kept in oak.
And I like it to be
yeah,
oakery,
absolutely.
buttery.
That's
if
why
I'm going to drink it. If I'm going to drink it.
And that's why some of the white wine, some of the few white wines that can be aged that aren't Riesling are white Burgundies or California Chardonnays. Yeah, Chardonnays in general, because they are traditionally kept in oak. But by and large, most white wines are kept in oak. Oak is going to destroy whatever subtlety they might have, and as a result,
they're way too subtle for me.
they don't age very well.
Right,
you can't
it's
hold
true.
on to them the way you
You
can.
do not want a 15-year-old Chardonnay
or
Pinot Grigio.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason now, I know that you're going, why Riesling? Because Riesling's not kept in oak. Here's the thing about Riesling. Riesling has an extremely high acidity. German Riesling in particular. Anything can have a low acidity depending on how you grow it. German Riesling, because of the climate and because of the conditions and when they harvest it, Riesling has a very high acidity. It has a very low pH and a very high total acidity. And that acts as a block to microbial growth. So one of the reasons that
the
Riesling...
microbes don't kick its butt as it gets older.
Yep. Now,
to put it in layman's terms.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, one of the things about wine is that the specific acid that is found in grapes and not much of anywhere else, tartaric acid, is the most potent antimicrobial acid of all the organic acids. Except maybe acetic, possibly, I think might be higher. But in terms of acids that you want to be drinking, that you find regularly in alcoholic beverages, tartaric acid is... And I've had people ask me, like, why is wine the one that they store vintages of? Is it just tradition? I'm like, no, it's literal chemical structure.
Right.
The chemistry of wine is geared towards having a shelf stability that very few other beverages can have. And you can age beers. I'm not saying that you can't. There are certain ciders. Depending on there's a whole host of factors that go into this.
Your typical barley wines can sit a lot
absolutely for certain. And the nice thing you have going for you there is alcohol content.
Yep.
That'll keep bacteria away too.
9 to 13%.
Yeah. It'll start being toxic to them.
Why do I know that?
I don't know. So it's not that white wines aren't shelf stable. It's that they don't really have anywhere to go, and that gets back to tannins because over time tannins will bind to each other. They change.
It changes the flavor.
And white wines start in a certain place, and they might mature slightly, and then it's a steep downhill drop, and it's all downhill from there.
And this will probably bore you to tears, but one of the things that Will and I did a couple years back before I left the country when COVID happened, I was gone for about a year, we went to a tasting, and we were tasting Napa cabs from the 70s.
Early 70s.
These were the cabs that kicked the French's butts.
Yes.
In the blind tasting, which was, what was that called?
The something of 76.
I'm sorry, man. I shouldn't have.
It's called something like the Tasting of 76, the Trial of 76.
At any rate,
we'll look it up and tell you in another episode.
Everybody.
Yes.
But in the blind tastings, even the French preferred Napa Cab.
Yeah.
Now, we also had a lot of, at the same time, in the same tastings, we were tasting the French wines from the same years.
Yes.
Mostly we're talking Beaucastle.
Yeah.
And then Chateau
It wasn't one of the top
Margaux.
5. Yeah. Margaux. That's right. It wasn't Margaux.
And you know what? These wines had lost in the web tastings to the American wines.
They were better.
The American wines were freaking horrible.
Well, 40 years. None of them were
none
what
of
we
them
would
aged
call.
well.
Yep, none of them aged well. The French wines aged less poorly than the American wines did.
I'm not saying that those wines were bad and they somehow beat them out magically. They were better 40 years ago, but they weren't aiming for aging when they made them.
Well, not only were they
didn't age well.
Not only were they not aging, we also have to look at back in the 70s. You had what we would now consider prehistoric bottling.
And no Mega Purple.
Right, no Mega Purple. Their alcohol content was also hovering around 12.5.
Yeah, it was very low because it wasn't as hot back then.
No.
There's no global warming, but it's hotter. Whatever.
Yeah, alcohol content is higher.
That may have alienated some of you. I'm sorry if that alienated you. Boy, am I sorry. Onward.
The wines, on average, are higher in alcohol content. Part of that is due to overall raising of temperatures. Part of it is due to yeast that can withstand higher alcohol content without dying. And some of it's just improved vinification techniques. There are things that you can do.
All that exists.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is even if the world weren't getting warmer or wine growing regions weren't getting warmer, there are things that you can do that stimulate sugar growth in grapes. Like
leave them on the vine longer.
Leave them on the vine longer. Remove the leaf canopy so that they get more.
Sit before you turn them into wine.
Exactly.
On mats or however you want to do it.
All
if you're
sorts
French,
of stuff.
it's mats.
If it's Italians, you just put them on the rooftop.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of stuff that you can do.
We know dumb stuff, or not dumb.
No, just extraneous
we know stuff. We just that you would probably never run into by accident.
If you never have or you don't do it very often, go to wine tastings. They're a lot of fun.
Yes,
and you will learn extraneous things that you never heard of before, like the French dry their grapes on straw mats. And
they're You know, Amarone, which is
Yep.
one of my favorite wines, is the Italians. They leave them on later. They harvest them later, and then they, as you mentioned, put them on the roof and let them dry, so they kind of dry up, and then you get more raisin, but you get more sugars. And
you get way more sugar, and it's also more extracted flavor
with their dessert wines.
Vin de Paella, straw wine.
Whereas I would not call Amarone a dessert wine, which is interesting.
But they do have a dessert. They do have a dessert wine they make from grapes that are dried in that style.
Yes.
They just stop the fermentation at a certain point.
And they don't call it Amarone.
They don't call it Amarone. I can't remember what the name of the wine is.
Now, the thing about Amarone is that's changed a lot over the years, too, because we had a 75 Amarone a while back to kind of celebrate something or other that was going on. And it wasn't nearly as big as the current Amarones, because in 75 they weren't competing with Napa, because Napa wasn't worth competing with.
Well, and also everything was just cooler. I mean,
that is true.
In
but I think they
purposely
purposely are trying to make it bigger.
Probably.
So the people who drink the bigger, the Americans drink the most wine because there's more of us.
Yep.
And we like really big wines because that's who we are. We like everything bigger than it ought to be.
I haven't looked it up since 2013, but in 2013 that was the year that we became the world's top wine consumer globally.
But at any rate, I've had wines from that vineyard, and they're much bigger now. They compete with Napa cabs as far as if you want that big mouthfeel and
what was the
everything that
vineyard?
comes with it.
It wasn't Quadretti, was it?
No, it was not Quadretti. I love Quadretti, by the way. That's a great vineyard. If you can get your hands on it, buy it.
I don't know that they existed.
I mean, I could look it up. It's like Bertolli.
Okay,
It was, but very good vineyard. Very good vineyard. They're 75. Just outside of my wheelhouse. Their current one's in it. You know, I mean, that's and part of that is because people want the bigger wines in America. Everybody's making bigger wines than they used to.
Right. I found myself wondering if part of the reason that wine seemed to leave so many people behind in the 90s and the early 2000s is because of that shift. Like the shift away, and by away I mean
from Pinot
in general.
Noir.
Well, no, it's just the shift away from the old world style of winemaking to realizing that there was a new world style of winemaking, that wasn't just an accident or that you could not just replicate that, but that it was reflecting a truth about wines.
And about the consumers in the world's biggest wine consumption, or the biggest wine market.
What a delicious wine.
That was marvelous. Thank you, Drew Bledsoe.
Yes.
Thank you, Josh McDaniels. You guys rocked it.
And thank you for also letting me know that I should be less knee-jerk judgmental about seeing some kind of brand name on a wine, whether it's a sports star or some other kind of celebrity that heretofore had nothing to do with wine. I should give them a shot, because you never know.
You never do, though. You know, I'm never going to be a big fan of...
the Wayne Gretzky cab?
The Wayne Gretzky cab. You just can't grow Cabernet Sauvignon in Canada. I'm sorry.
He's got to be having it trucked in.
I hope so, but it doesn't matter. I had it right outside of his hometown, and it was horrible. Just horrible. So I don't blame him for trying, but I'd probably have moved to Napa if I were him. He's got all the money in the world. He could. He scores, not this time.
Suspend your judgment, but don't dispense with it entirely.
Right. Make sure. I mean, it's the wine.
Yeah.
The wine is what counts.
Yep.
None of the hype matters.
Right.
I mean, the price matters to some extent because that judges whether or not you can get your hands on it. There are wines I'm not going to buy. You're not going to sell me a $3,000 bottle of wine. I could afford it. I mean, I wouldn't go broke buying it every now and then, but I'm not going to do it because the value. I mean, I've had $1,000 bottles of wine, $700 a bottle of wine. The value difference between something like this one and that, minuscule if there's a value difference. Because sometimes they're doing it, we only made 2,000 bottles, so you got to pay us $1,000 a bottle because we've got a lot of expenses. Well, that's cool, but I'm not getting anything for that. I'm just helping underwrite your vineyard, and I'm not really in the business to underwrite other people's vineyards if all I'm getting out of that is a bottle.
Oh, and that's the thing, is that the Rubus thing really indicates something very interesting about the wine world. Well, not just the wine world, this kind of thing in general, is that scarcity is in a large part manufactured.
Yes.
They didn't have to sell... They could have made twice as many bottles as they usually did, driven down the price a little bit, but they didn't want to. They wanted to keep it at that level.
They wanted to be exclusive.
And that tells you, because the fact that Rubens could sell at 25, and who knows what the mystery people were selling it for.
I heard over $200 a bottle.
That just goes
and
to
that
show
was a
you.
decade ago.
Yep, and that just goes to show you that there is a large part of this that is arbitrary.
You know, one of the wines I do enjoy is the Wraith. We mentioned that, and it's 100 Acre, and I've got a bottle of it in my cellar, and I purchased 4 bottles of it at $700 a bottle.
Yeah.
$6.99. Well, there were only 6 allocated to the whole damn state.
To the state of Virginia.
You want to talk about your scarcity, and that didn't happen by accident.
No, it's
However, when we review the Wraith, I may not say those things. I probably will. Who am I kidding?
We can say that only 6 were allocated to the state of Virginia. I mean, that part is definitely true, and they're not really hiding that.
Yeah. They sell it in 3 bottles cases. They sent 2 cases. I managed to get the full case of 1, and they're not supposed to break those cases, but one of the distributors was just like, I am never going to sell a $2,100 case of wine in this market. And so we broke it up, and I got one, and interestingly enough, a friend of mine down the road got one of them. I don't know who got the 3rd one. Floyd had, this tiny little county had 5 out of 6 of the allocation to the state of Virginia.
You know, it's funny how that works, because years ago, Floyd used to have 2 of the top 100 Vivino users in America. Every time you and I got together at Dogtown,
half of us, 2/3 of the top. Because also at the particular place that I buy most of my wine, there's another guy named Tom, and he was also in the top 100.
Yep.
So each state should have 2. We had 3 of them in the same damn wine shop, and that wine shop was part of why we were all so highly ranked.
Yep. Oh yeah, no. I have such a backlog of wines. If I'm just able to find the labels, I could go back and retroactively review vintages that probably don't even exist anymore.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. I could go back through notes and old wines and like Facebook posts where I talked about them. But you know what? None of that's relevant now.
No.
Even if you can get your hand on that wine, it's been in a bottle for another decade. And what I had to say about it 10 years ago doesn't have anything to do with it, because it's aged. It just isn't correct. It won't taste like... My notes won't be correct, even though they were at the time.
Right. No, they're only good for so long, and
probably about a year, maybe 2.
And they're also really just there to anchor your memories as to whether or not.
Okay, the Predator, you can review a wine, and it can be 30 years old, and it's right, because that wine does not change.
That wine does not change at all.
Too much liquid
Zero
smoke
evolution,
and too much Mega Purple, and many of the others. You can pour that puppy into a decanter and leave it there overnight, and it will taste the same in the morning. Now, if that's what you're looking for and you like the way that wine tastes, rock it, buy it, enjoy it.
I will say this: there have been times at a party where I poured myself a glass of wine and for whatever reason got distracted and left it and came back. It's like, oh, I really should have drank that a while ago. Will not happen with the Predator.
It will not happen. In fact, to tell you like how much of a difference, I went to a party. And this person knows wine. Good guy, really like him. Won't name him because he could end up being a guest here sometime. And I brought the Predator because it was the best one I could find in Food Lion. Everything else was closed, and I'd just been invited that day. And I felt terrible about it. He took one look at it and put it up and said, "That's too good for this riffraff," which was talking about the people who were at the party. And here I am, like, thinking, oh my God, I'm bringing the Predator. And he's like, it's too good for the riffraff. And so that's, and this guy has a good palate.
He does.
He knows wine. And maybe he knows his friends better than I do.
Perhaps.
But that wine was never going to change. It's just what it is.
He should have popped it right then and there.
Well, he could pop it whenever he popped it. It was going to tace the same.
That's true.
But apparently,
that's the nice thing about it.
Yeah, he was like, this is an Apothic Red crowd. It's like, and I don't mean to bash Apothic. Yeah, yes, I do.
Yes, you do.
I mean to Bothapathic.
Bothapathic?
Woo, let's have some more wine. Yeah, baby. Oh, man.
And on that note.
Yes. So follow us and all the different, we will have a list. We will get this actually professionally produced, and we will have places for you to follow us. Go through all the different social media, and if you really want to support us, there will be a Patreon, there will be, believe it or not, an OnlyFans. I don't promise to keep my shirt on, but that's as far as we're going if I don't. We're not, we're not there for the porn aspect of it. We're there because...
Believe it or not, OnlyFans has other uses.
If like, you ask us to review a $150 bottle of wine because you're thinking about getting it for your anniversary, and we do, and you love it, and you want to toss us $10 to say thanks. That's what's OnlyFans is for. You can't do that on Patreon.
Right. You can only do like a certain amount per month. Yeah.
So
that is the handy part about it. We're
trying to come up with all the different places so that we can, we're doing this because we love wine. Mm-hmm. But, sorry.
We want other people to join in with us.
I'm a capitalist, so I monetize pretty much everything I do, I monetize. Well, not everything, but, that's what we're here for. And, again, think of us as your wine drinking buddies.
Yep.
At some point we will start telling you ahead of time what wines we're drinking and give you links so you can drink them with us. We're not quite there yet, but we're going to get there, and you're going to drink a lot of wine with us.
There was a guy at a TC Carter band at Dogtown on Friday, and he said, "Hey, y'all, just to let you know, we got the tip jars up here in case you want to give us a little gas money to get home." He's like, "I'm worried y'all ain't heard me. We got
because we're not getting home without that gas money."
Well, no, I liked his persistence. I liked that he immediately, he didn't do it later. He did it right on. And I went and I got all the money that I had in my wallet. And I went over. I was like, "TC, this jar right here." He's like, "Yeah, that one." I was like, "Are you sure?" And I put the money in. But it's I appreciate that kind of persistence.
It's cool, but it's a tough world because cash.
Right.
Who's got that anymore?
I know.
Yesterday, I took my kids to an amusement park. It was a cashless. I'm not sure that's legal, but they don't really care. What are you going to do? Sue them?
Yeah.
It was cashless. They would not take your cash.
Right.
I mean, as somebody who's owned businesses,
which is odd because usually it's the other way around.
Well, but the thing is, when you become cashless, money stops disappearing from the till.
True.
So the amount of money I've heard can be as high as 20 to 50% on average for American businesses.
Wow.
Money flies out of the till if you don't have a way to know it. So when you go cashless, it saves you of all the time of having the little camera up above it and spending hours and hours trying to figure out whether or not your employees are ripping you off. That is very true. And if you don't trust your employees, they're worse.
Right.
And if you do,
who knows?
There's still too many of them,
right.
So it's a tough thing to do.
It is.
But having to live on tips outside where it's got to be cash. When I go to a major city, I stuff my pocket with dollar bills, and anybody with a sign gets a dollar bill.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, "Well, what about all the people who are ripping you off?" And I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with losing the money of the people ripping me off because of the people who weren't ripping me off.
And by and large, the people with a sign probably aren't professional beggars who make $40,000 a year doing that. Most of them probably are real.
That's another tangent. Here we go. But
as the wine flows, the tangents increase.
Count on it. Thank you very much for coming to the inaugural version of Warren and Will's Wild Wine Reviews. Not sure how wild it is, but keep watching. This hair color will probably change. The shirts will get wilder. Will might wear a dress. I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen.
You really do not know.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
See you next time.
And drink some wine. If you can get your hands on this one, drink this one.
You really should.
Night.